Warum scheitern die meisten Cold Calls? Nicht, weil du zu wenig Talent hast, nicht, weil dein Produkt nicht überzeugt und schon gar nicht, weil du das falsche Skript hast. Die meisten Cold Calls scheitern, weil das Gehirn deines Kunden das alles schon 1000-mal gehört hat. Am 4. April hatte ich die Ehre, als Keynote-Speaker beim Artist Circus in Berlin auf der Bühne zu stehen und der Titel meiner englischsprachigen Keynote war Flip the Script, How the Best Outbound Sales Teams Outperform Everyone Else in 2025. Und in dieser Episode hörst du die komplette Aufnahme, eine Reise von meiner Kindheit als Außenseiter bis hin zum Nummer 1 Sales Rep in ganz Europa und die Antwort auf die zentrale Frage, warum funktionieren manche Sales Teams und andere eben nicht. Du erfährst, warum modernes Outbound oft ins Leere läuft und wie du durch den Lärm durchbrichst, wie du echte Kaufentscheidungen triffst, emotional und nicht rational und welche 3 psychologischen Muster die besten Outbound Sales Teams heute schon nutzen, um 2025 ganz weit vorne mitzuspielen. Wenn du Cold Calling machst oder ein Outbound Team führst, wirst du nach dieser Episode die Welt ein bisschen anders sehen. Los geht's!
When I first moved to Austria, nobody understood my name. So I introduced myself in the kindergarten as a small kid, and everyone thought that my name is Hirschi, like the Hirsch, the animal, you know, like the deer in English. So a lot of my friends call me since then Hirschi. But my name was always a high barrier for entry because it's a Czech name, and this is where my story starts in Czechoslovakia. When I was 4 years old, my parents moved from Czechoslovakia to Austria. So I got thrown into a completely new system, from communism to capitalism. So here I was, arrived in Austria, new country, new school, new language, have no friends, a strange sounding name called Hirschi that no one could pronounce. And my parents had very little money because we were coming from a socialist country and we're living in the richest city in Austria, a town called Baden by Wien. And then I got even diagnosed with asthma, and due to the medication I got extremely overweight very quickly. So I thought to myself, great baseline to start a completely new school career in an unknown country, right? But despite all of that, I was gifted in one thing. I was gifted in spotting patterns. I have seen patterns, recurring themes in everything. And if you look around yourself, there are patterns everywhere. So for example, in nature, you have spring, summer, followed by autumn and winter, and then the cycle repeats itself. Or for example, in the financial markets, who of you is investing into Bitcoin or crypto? Okay, yeah, quite some. So you have optimism, euphoria, everyone is buying Bitcoin, it's going to the moon, right? Then there is fear, depression coming, everyone is selling its crypto with the loss. We're getting it later, you know, but then hope, optimism, and euphoria is coming back again, and the cycle repeats itself. And I still remember standing on that schoolyard. That was a schoolyard in Austria when I grew up, sitting like an outsider, watching other kids play, didn't understanding the system, didn't understand the language, didn't know how to fit in, trying to impress other kids and win friends, but nothing has worked. But then I realized something. The kids that actually made friends were not lucky. They were doing something different. They were following patterns. So I started watching. Who did the kids talk to first? What jokes landed? How did other kids win friends? And once I've seen the patterns, which were, for example, that there are leaders and followers, that there are cool kids and uncool kids, you know, and the cool kids, they do different things, they say different things, and they behave differently than the quote-unquote uncool kids. I've seen also how to get invited to parties. And once I've understood those patterns, I could use it myself. I was starting mimicking what I have seen around me, and all of a sudden, I wasn't an outsider anymore. I have cracked the code of winning friends. Fast forward 20 years into my first sales role, I was 23 years old, sitting in an office with a list of prospects in front of me. And back then, I was a big fan of the movie Glengarry Ross, you know, the guy from Always Be Closing. So I thought that sales is about 2 things. It's about numbers and it's about confidence. So if I do a lot of calls and I prove to be really confident, then eventually I will be successful. So I was super excited because on my 3rd day, I was supposed to do my first cold call. I was sitting on the desk, watching on my desk phone that you actually see on that desk. That was the phone I did my first cold call with. And I couldn't do the call. My heart was pounding and my brain started playing tricks on me. What if something hangs up? What if I embarrass myself? What if I say something stupid and the colleagues will laugh at me? So I came up with a plan. I would wait until everyone else would be on lunch break And then I would do my first cold call in secret. And that's exactly what I've done. So a lunch break, alone in the office, dial the first number. After 5 seconds, customer picks up. I do my pitch. 5 seconds later, click. The customer hangs up on me. So that was my first cold call. And let me tell you one thing. I was terrible. Not just that day, not just that week, but for 2 weeks straight, I wasn't able to book a single meeting. So my customer, not my customer, but my manager takes me aside. And of course I thought he will fire me right now after 2 weeks, no meeting, like, come on, what is that? But instead, he looks me in the eyes and says something that changes the trajectory of my sales career forever. And he says something like, I think the formatting is screwed, but whatever. You think that sales is about scripts. You think that sales is about what to say. It's about the tactics. But it is not. It's about understanding human nature. Sales is about understanding human nature. And I thought, okay, understanding human nature. And then it clicked in me. Because I thought back to my childhood days. Back to that schoolyard where I've seen other kids playing, feeling like an outsider, observing patterns. And then I realized sales is the same. Sales is also just a social game that has patterns. And if I would be understanding those patterns, I wouldn't be just following a script anymore, but would be really understanding how sales is done. And that's when I realized that success, whether in outbound sales or winning friends, comes down to 3 critical skills. And the first skill is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition means that you understand what works and what doesn't work. So who of you, by the show of hands, played or plays a musical instrument? Played or played? Yeah, wonderful. A few of you, perfect. So what's the first thing that you learned when you start playing music? What's the first thing that you learned? Notes, exactly. You started to learn the pattern of musical notes. And once you understood the pattern of musical notes, then comes the second skill, is pattern utilization. So once you understand the pattern of musical notes, you're now all of a sudden able to play music with other composers. You can play Beethoven, Chopin, or for example, Mozart. But then comes the third skill. And this is the skill that only a very few people master. And those that master it, they dominate their niche. And that's pattern creation. It's when you're able to create your own unique, repeatable systems for success. So in that music analogy, now you're not just playing music of other composers, but you're now able to compose your own songs. So you become a composer and you become a creator. And once I've seen the patterns in outbound sales, once I have seen why cold calling works, what makes customers may say yes, what customers may say no. And once I've seen the patterns, I could start using them. And instead of repeating what thousands of other salespeople say to the customers, I could start creating my own scripts, my own systems, and become a composer. And that's when everything changed for me. 6 months from then, I was the #1 sales rep in the whole office. 6 months from then, you see that picture here, this was a month where I hit over 200% of my quota. 6 months again, I was the #1 sales rep out of the whole EMEA outbound team of 250 sales reps. And I repeated this for 5 years straight. For 5 years in a row, I was the #1 sales rep in whole of EMEA and always in the top 10 worldwide in a company of 3,000 employees. And as a sales director, I was fortunate to teach all of those patterns to other sales reps. And after 15,000 cold calls, after 650 deals, so that's how many calls I have done, I tried to count it, like hochrechnen in Deutsch. I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. Most things that you are taught about outbound sales and cold calling are absolutely wrong. And the reason why you are struggling or your teams are struggling in outbound sales is not just because you don't have the skill, it's not because you don't have the will, sometimes it is, but it's because you are following a broken system. And in this talk, in the remaining 9-10 minutes, I want to teach you 3 of those patterns that will enable you to create your own unique systems, so you stop repeating what thousands of other salespeople say to their customers, and by that you will outperform everyone else. How does it sound? Great. Awesome! Woo! Okay, fantastic. Thanks for participation on a high level here. So, but first, before we do that, let's look how our brain works, okay? So let's imagine for a second you are a salesperson 400,000 years ago, okay? Standing in front of another human being, no ChatGPT, no email, no automation tools, trying to trade food, shelter, or other resources with another human being. And let me tell you one thing. The way that our brain and the brain of the buyer works today is as primitive as it worked 400,000 years ago. Our brain hasn't changed much since then. It operates on the same fundamental principles as it operated 400,000 years ago. So our brain receives through our vision, through our auditive system, what we feel, what we smell, and what we taste, our 5 sensors, 11 million bits per second, 11 million bits of data per second. So that's like a 1,000 page Word file every second that goes into our system. But out of those 11 million bits, you only focus on 50 at the same time. So if you would take this soccer pitch, and this soccer pitch would represent 11 million bits, everything that you could perceive, what you hear outside, the music, my voice, it's hot, the light, all the data. You only focus on something that is as small as this bow stamp in the middle of the pitch. Everything else gets deleted. We don't perceive reality, we only perceive reality that is very selective, and everything else gets deleted. Otherwise, our brain would be overwhelmed. So it came up with strategies to prevent us from cognitive overload. And it deletes everything that is not fitting in one of those 3 categories. If it's not new, ignore it. If it's not dangerous or life-threatening, ignore it. And if it's not unexpected or totally out of the ordinary, ignore it. Exactly. So to succeed in outbound sales, we need to communicate in a way that is not filtered out by our subconscious mind. Now, if we look how outbound is done today, it usually doesn't fit any of the 3 criteria. It's not new, it's not unexpected, and it's not dangerous or life-threatening, right? So yesterday I read an interesting study. SDRs and outbound sellers are doing 55% more calls and more emails than 10 years ago, but are getting 55% less meetings. So somehow more effort is leading to fewer results. And the question, why is that? The LinkedIn inboxes of our customers are blinking like a Christmas tree. Their email inboxes are filled with pseudo, you know what I mean? Individualized emails. And their phones are flooded with robocalls. Everyone sounds the same. SDRs are screaming with their messages, hey, do you have 2 minutes time for me? Hey, do I catch you at a bad time? Hey, quick question about your growth strategy. The reason why these don't work is because they are predictable. And because they're predictable and the brain of your buyer has heard them so many times, it gets filtered out as background noise. So who of you, if you get cold called for a wine subscription or a magazine subscription, who of you can spot a cold call in 4 seconds? Who of you can spot a cold email just by the subject line in 4 seconds? Hey, come on, if you're not raising your hand, you lie about other shit too, don't you? Okay. So what can we do about this? If automation is making actively things worse, if we cannot rely on volume, and if buyers have tuned out traditional sales approaches, then we need to stop using those and we need to align our outbound strategy with how our brain actually works. And that is what Flip the Script is all about. If we talk about Flip the Script, it's about reversing traditional sales behaviors that our buyers expect. So very simply said, we need to do the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing. And there are 3 patterns at play when someone decides to say yes or no to your request. And the first pattern is pattern interrupts. So about 4 or 5 months ago, I was strolling through the largest shopping street in Austria. Johannes, I see you, you know it, it's the Marilferstraße, right? Marilferstraße, the largest shopping street in Vienna. And you know those moments where you see someone and you hope that he doesn't see you? This was one of those moments. I've seen a guy that is collecting donations for a kind of an animal organization. And I hope he doesn't see me, but of course he sees me, he approaches me, and I thought he will say something like, hey, do you want to donate? But instead, he looks me in the eyes and says, "Do you like animals?" And I say, "Yes." And the moment I say yes, damn it, he got me. And then all of a sudden, I kind of felt obliged to donate, because I cannot say, "Hey, I like animals, but hey, I won't donate." Like, it doesn't add up, right? But he totally broke my pattern, because he said something that I haven't expected at all. So to break the pattern, we need to say, write, and do things that the customer is not expected. And not saying things like, "Hey, you have 2 minutes time for me," or "Hey, I've read something in the newspaper," or "Hey, do you catch it at a bad time?" The reason why these don't work is because the customer has heard them and he knows that this will be probably a salesperson. So to succeed in outbound sales, we need to do different things. We need to use pattern interrupts. That could be, for example, things like, "Hey, you probably hate getting cold emails. Me too, promise this one is different." Or, "Hey, you weren't expecting my call. I would like to win you over as a customer. Is this something that is possible?" Say, do things that seem outrageous, but say and do and write things that the customer is not expecting, so you break the pattern of everything else that he is expecting. And that leads me to the second pattern. And it is that decision-making is emotional. You remember when I told you the story when I was a child, I was overweight, my parents had no money, poor me, crybaby. The thing is, when I was 18 years old, all of my friends, their parents were lawyers and doctors. They got fancy cars like BMWs and Audis, and I was driving the Skoda, the old used-up Skoda of my father. And I always dreamt of an Audi A5, a black Audi A5 with an S-line trim. So when I was like 4 or 5 years ago, I did an analysis. I would say, hey, I would buy the car with the most points. I created a spreadsheet, and I put in cars from a used car portal, online car portal, BMW models, Skodas, and also some of those Audi A5s. I assigned all of those cars points with weighted criteria, and now, of course, you know which car hasn't got the most points. It wasn't the Audi, right? But it was the Skoda, right? So my Czech card, Skoda is a Czech company, my Czech card was kind of happy, but it didn't really trigger the heart of me as a petrol head that likes the sound and engine and like the prestige of cars. So I redid the analysis. I weighted the criteria a bit differently, so the Audi would came up on the top, so I could finally buy my Audi. My point is, humans base decisions on emotions, and then they are looking for rational arguments that support their emotional decision. The Homo economicus that is making decisions just based on Zahlen, Daten, Fakten never existed. Even in Germany, people make decisions based on emotions. And then they are looking for their ZDF. Still, a lot of outbound messages, outbound account executives, SDRs, try to book meetings with, "Hey, we have this and this feature," or "Hey, we are market leader in," or "Hey, have you heard that we are also working with this and this company?" They are not evoking any emotions. And if we speak about emotions, then I'll give you a little crash course on emotions. There are two main emotions that we have. It's either pain or we have pleasure. Either we seek pleasure, or we try to avoid pain. Out of those two, avoiding pain is always the bigger lever. You will always do more to save your life than to reach your goals. You will always do more if there's something at stake. If I would give you 100 euros, would you be happy or would you be pissed? Thankful, okay. If I would take 100 euros away from you, would you be happy or would you be pissed? Pissed. But Kian would be more pissed about the 100 euro loss than he would be happy about the 100 euro gain. Because a loss is always hurting us emotionally more than a gain would do. So this means in outbound, we need to make sure that we create, I know it sounds a bit painful, but we need to create pain. We need to create some leverage, and especially negative pain. So what we need to do is we need to stop saying things like, "Hey, we help customers to increase their revenue." It's not eliciting any emotions. If maybe it's a positive emotion, but what you could say instead is something like, "Hey, customers with problem XYZ are losing on average 10% of revenue." We speak about problems. We speak about what is at stake. Every gain can be framed into a loss. We just need to be smart about it and frame it as a loss and say what is at stake, and people will move. And that leads me to the last and the third pattern, which is open loops. Unfortunately, I was promised that I will have a flip chart. I don't have a flip chart, so let's do an imaginary kind of exercise, right? Imagine there would be a flip chart, and imagine I would take my imaginary pen and I would paint a circle that is incomplete on that flip chart. I would paint that circle that is incomplete. It's not closed. What would your brain be compelled to do? To close the circle! Exactly. So our brain seeks closure on incomplete information. That's why cliffhangers work that well. That's why you end up watching Netflix until 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning because still you wanted to go to bed at 10 in the evening, because they're so good to hook you for the next episode of your favorite show. So in outbound sales, the third pattern that you need to use is give the customer enough information so he just wants more and open the loop. So you say things like, instead of saying, hey, we increased the revenue of customer X by 10% by doing fancy XYZ solution, giving you the complete solution, say just, hey, we helped to avoid 15% of cost with a customer that struggled from problem. You see, there is negative, there is pain, there is leverage. And then I say, hey, I can explain to you exactly how they did it. And you open the loop. Now, most outbound sales is designed for the rational brain. It's complete, it's predictable, and it doesn't evoke any emotion. So to flip the script, to break through, you need to break patterns by saying and doing and writing something the customer is not expecting and hasn't heard 1,000 times. You need to evoke emotions, ideally negative emotions, and you need to open loops by giving incomplete information. Now, for closing, I have created something for you. It's a cold calling script that includes all of those 3 patterns. So it has open loops, it has negative emotion, and it's not predictable. It breaks the pattern. You can download it with the QR code, or you can go to qrcode.de /flip the script, qrcode.de /flip the script. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you out or answer any questions. To close off, I would like to leave you with something that's bigger than sales tactics. It goes beyond sales tactics. If you are able to recognize, utilize, and create your own patterns, you won't be just succeeding in outbound sales, but you will become a better communicator. And somehow you will also redefine how outbound sales is done. Sales may have changed, but what hasn't changed is human psychology. Human beings are still making decisions based on emotions, curiosity, and instinct before logic kicks in. So flip the script. It's not a new strategy. It's a way to communicate in a world that's constantly trying to filter you out. So here's the decision that you have to make. Either you continue doing what you are doing right now. You send the same emails, you do the same calls, and by doing just a little bit more, you hope that you eventually be successful. Or you flip the script and you align the sales behavior, how customers are actually making decisions, and you start conversations that your customers actually want to have. I personally believe that outbound sales is sexier than ever, and it's being redefined by those that are willing to do it differently. Thanks.